You've joined our session, Best Practices to Securing AI with AWS and CrowdStrike. My name is Brett Shaw. I'm on our product marketing team, and I cover our portfolio that are around cloud security. And joining me today are two of my colleagues that are going to dive deep into how we secure AI and those best practices, but I'll let them to introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Solomon, Senior Solutions Architect at CrowdStrike.
And I am Jen Reed, a Principal Security Solutions Architect here at AWS.
Awesome, and we'll bring them back up here in a minute. I'll kick us off in this session today. But again, super excited to have you here with us to dive deeper into how we're securing AI, working together as a partnership, as you as organizations are building different Gen AI applications and using AI within your organizations. So we're going to talk about those trends and those risks that come along with adopting AI, what we're seeing from different organizations, how adversaries are potentially targeting organizations and what they're doing. I'll then pass it over to Jen, who's going to talk about the Better Together story with AWS and CrowdStrike, dive a little bit deeper into how we're securing AI, as well as after her, Rob's going to dive into how CrowdStrike specifically secures AI and the different solutions we have out there to do so. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's talk about these trends and risks that AI bring. And a lot of this in terms of organizations adopting AI and what we're seeing probably doesn't come as a surprise to a lot of people. Right? It's increasing productivity, these mundane tasks that individuals have to do day in and day out. We're seeing obviously a huge increase in productivity. Enhanced decision making, there's so much data that you can put in and receive the output in a matter of seconds with the analytics that it's able to do and making those decisions even faster. Accelerating revenue growth, coming up with unique and different ways. It's a lot of times more cost effective to deploy some sort of Gen AI application and make individuals and employees faster as they're working. And finally, scalability and customization. Again, making certain applications to build out and be innovative within the organization, allowing people within the organization to scale and perform at a high performance. And so as you see, there's a couple studies and surveys that have been done out there. A lot of organizations are adopting AI. Their employees are regularly using Gen AI tools. However, there's a concern there because as this adoption happens, the attack surface grows. But a lot of organizations, they're not thinking about this, right? 33% of organizations are only addressing the cyber risk that comes along with the use of Gen AI tools within organizations. This is going to be a huge market. As you know, it's exploding everywhere. You see it out there in the expo. Everybody has AI in their messaging, but it's going to be a huge market. $300 billion in 2 years. That comes from Gartner itself. It's going to explode. And again, as organizations adopt this, the attack surface grows. So how do we secure it? Well, again, we've got to understand how to do that, and that's what we'll talk about. But one number I wanted to flash up here is CrowdStrike releases a global threat report every single year. And one of the very key numbers that really stood out this year was the 51 seconds. This number is the fastest breakout time that we've seen from adversaries, meaning they will gain access to a host, and from there, they'll move laterally. Again, this is such a rapid pace. A lot of times defenders, they can't move this fast. They can't move as fast as the adversaries. And again, it just goes to show as Gen AI, it's a relatively new frontier. The way you're building on it, the way it's being used, the different open source tools or libraries that are being used to build out AI and the models that are used are relatively new, and how do we protect those? Adversaries are targeting these, and we'll get into that. And so what are the security considerations that need to be thought of? We've got AI model safety, right? Ensuring that models aren't being poisoned, that there's no biased responses that are coming through. That means there's got to be testing and monitoring and adding guardrails as things are being built out. You've got infrastructure security, right? You can build and understand exactly what's out there. A lot of times we're seeing that engineering is maybe deploying these different Gen AI based services and tools, and security doesn't even know about them. So you need to have visibility into them. Even with the data security side, understanding what data is being used and put in there. If there's PII, if there's sensitive and proprietary information that's being used, and that goes along with the privacy concerns as well. And so we're going to dive deeper into this. I'm going to pass it over to Jen, who's going to tell the Better Together story with AWS and CrowdStrike.
Thank you, Brett. So I'm really excited to take over and tell you how, working together, AWS and CrowdStrike, we can help in this situation. So let's first level set. So there's a logical generative AI stack when we were talking about generative AI here at AWS. And this includes the infrastructure level, the data level, the foundational model level, and then the applications that may be using those underlying stacks. And we have a number of different services that we provide that sit across those different layers. And here you can see that. And so you have at the very foundational layer, of course, we have EC2 and compute, as well as chips such as Trainium, Inferentia, as well as GPUs that are offered by NVIDIA on AWS. On top of that, we have tools that allow our customers to build generative AI, and those often include Bedrock, as well as SageMaker. And a lot of our customers then may sometimes deploy those models via containers, LMI containers, over on the actual infrastructure, GPUs, and Trainium themselves. And then lastly, we have applications that our customers use on AWS, and those include Amazon Q for Business, Amazon Q for Connect, QuickSight, as well as Amazon Q for Developers. So if we dig a little bit deeper, when we're actually building those tools and applications that allow you to leverage generative AI, of course we have Amazon SageMaker and Bedrock. And a lot of these things provide you the ability to fine-tune as well as create models of your own, but they have built-in guardrails that allow you to have some security and protections as you're building those on the managed services of Amazon Bedrock and SageMaker. But here's where it becomes really important. So the shared responsibility model, I'm sure all of you have seen this before, but AWS provides the security of the cloud. So we make sure all of the infrastructure and the managed services that you're using and deploying your workloads here on AWS are protected. We have a number of certifications and security frameworks we use, and those can be found on Artifact. So you can pull those down and review them for your own compliance purposes. But this is where we really partner with our partners like CrowdStrike to help you when you're building these generative AI applications in AWS. You can make sure those are built securely in the cloud, and so that you can take all the time to innovate, but making sure that the security is in place to allow you not to have to focus always on that, but actually hit the target of development of actually generating this app or this agent and getting it in production. So one of the things that makes AWS and CrowdStrike, our partnership, as successful as it's been, is that we have over 60 integrations. So in the last 10 years of co-development with AWS, we have a number of integrations that provide telemetry, both in the deployment side, runtime protection, as well as cloud security posture management and vulnerability and response. And each of these provide telemetry information that's really useful for CrowdStrike to help support your teams so that you don't have to worry about the security of these workloads, but also gives hooks for remediation and detection and response in real time. So when we think about generative AI, it's important to remember that traditionally we've often thought from a threat detection and response perspective, the target persona that a lot of actors would leverage is try to come in and appear to be the customer or the end user, so they might steal a session cookie. But now with generative AI, we have to think a whole lot more about the additional personas that make up what you have from an infrastructure perspective when you're deploying and running these applications. And each of these can have individual access that maybe allow them from an attacker perspective to leverage that access and stack permissions to get access to your intellectual property and your customer data. One of the things I like to point out is protecting generative AI isn't just about protecting the LLM. It's also really important to think about you're still always going to be looking at your top 10 for web applications because that's not going away. Often, a lot of times, those things are stacked when they're attacking an LLM to actually leverage that to get a better foothold into the application. And so I like to take those individual top 10 and actually stack them according to how you might think about those initial layers we were talking about. How do I attack via authentication and authorization? How do I attack via data, the threat detection response, as well as compliance and network and application protection? But the way I like to think about it is let's take the whole application stack and let's just have a sample application. So here we have what you might think of as a typical type of RAG model deployment. And so you have your data on one side, which are your data pipelines feeding your application. You have the front end of your application that's being served up via Amplify. And so if I layer in the application OWASP top 10 into that generative AI application, you can see that there are a number of attack vectors that are opened up just from a web application perspective. We haven't even looked at LLMs yet, but each of these attack vectors can give access to those services or those implications for your application to open up as targets. If I then layer in those for the LLM, you can see it starts to focus more on the data, the back end. So if I can poison, if I can attack, if I can infiltrate via supply chain, I can affect my end application. But a lot of those things are still leveraging some of the footholds that are caused by issues of misconfiguration and identity attacks. And so with CrowdStrike and applying Falcon Cloud Security and the sensor, what customers are able to do is mitigate and block some of those attacks by uncovering the misconfigurations and with runtime protection, stop things as they're happening. And so if I take the AWS services that we talked about before and overlay those from the authentication, authorization, compliance, data protection, network application protection, threat detection, and incident response, you can see both the AWS services that provide the telemetry for those, but also the capabilities in combination with CrowdStrike modules that really help protect each of those layers. And if we think about that application process flow, so just simplified here, you can actually see what we're going to continue to dig a little bit deeper, and you can see how CrowdStrike protects across that AI application flow. So how you can leverage the inputs and outputs from prompt injection and that insecure output handling, as well as leveraging where you are in the application stack to really understand your supply chain vulnerabilities and plugin designs, and then where in the model those targets are occurring to actually affect your data, over-reliance, and model theft. And then lastly, getting access to the data store for both sensitive information disclosure, but also excessive agency. And to talk a bit more about this, I'm going to turn over to Rob Solomon.
Thanks, Jen. So now what do you do about that? We're going to dive into that. So just as a kind of refresher, the attack surface of generative AI, agentic AI applications are complex. And protecting those applications requires a cross-domain protection strategy. So just kind of reviewing, it really starts with visibility. Like you need to see all of the surfaces of all of the application components, the data stores, the identities, all of that needs to be protected. So it's really important to surface all of that information so that security teams and application teams can actually take steps to secure those components. supply chain. In many cases, the models and tools are vended in containers that can be made available in public container image repositories. So developer teams may want to use those, but can you really trust them? So it's important to look at that supply chain. And that also includes any external services, SaaS services that the overall application may be reaching out to. Again, infrastructure and data, top to bottom, it's really important to protect the data that everything from initial prompts to the responses, vector data stores that supply domain-specific information in RAG applications. And the runtime, of course, so where the models are running in an operating system, an attack on the runtime level really makes it possible to do a lot of damage. So seeing whatever might be happening in the live environment, also really critical. So just to talk about some general best practices and mitigation strategies, really thinking about when you're building those models and those applications to make sure that you're using secure packages. So people have probably heard of Python Pickle, a serialization, deserialization package for models. Lots of vulnerabilities. So you can do a better job just by kind of avoiding some of these packages that already have those. Continuously monitoring the models for anomalous responses, anomalous behaviors, doing that sort of ongoing validation of the responses is really important. So that's a lot of data that is really important to collect from the operation of the model and being able to not just have those logs, those application logs for, in the case of forensics, but to be continuously monitoring them for anomalies and validating that data. When you're training the models, if you're not being very careful to govern access and the purity of that data, it's that data itself and training the models is definitely a target of attack. And all of this requires good governance, to make sure that, again, you're aware of all the edges and surfaces to make sure that you are securing all of them. And it's a team sport. As Jen was showing before, there's a lot of different personas that go into the creation of these applications. Everybody needs to be on board. It's everybody's responsibility. So how does CrowdStrike help with this? So we're going to focus specifically or primarily on Falcon Cloud Security, which is out of our consolidated platform. Falcon Cloud Security has the most to do with protecting these applications. But again, given the cross-domain nature of these applications, it's important to consider other modules that might come into play for protecting your applications. And when we talk about Falcon Cloud Security, cloud in and of itself is complex. You have everything from foundational components like VMs and networks and storage, but you also have you have the infrastructure as code, the CI/CD pipelines that are required for building and operating those applications, managed services, AWS, the broadest and deepest portfolio of cloud services. All of them need to be configured, turned on, turned off, whatever, but configuring them according to security best practices is not necessarily obvious. So getting that kind of ongoing response. And then the operating systems that run inside of EC2 or container environments, those runtime environments, also really important to protect. So that kind of brings together the entire picture of discovering what the risk is in your environment, prioritizing those risks, because just going at it to try to fix everything is not necessarily going to be practical for your operations team. So prioritizing that risk continuously based upon new information in the environment, and then prioritizing those fixes. In the runtime environment, detecting, again, prioritizing and responding. So the inputs or the components of proactive security, we're talking about security posture management. So that's everything from, as I mentioned, cloud service misconfigurations and indicators of attack. One of the things that we're continuously paying attention to is that stream of information from CloudTrail that tells us everything that happens on the control plane layer of the cloud. We're able to take that information in near real time and see if there's an in-progress attack and surface that information for security teams to respond. Of course, part of proactive security, container image assessment, making sure that your images don't have vulnerabilities or misconfigurations. Again, that can be used for attacking those containers, maybe hijacking the operating system and tampering with models in the runtime environment. And the expert AI risk scoring, very important. You look at vulnerabilities in these different operating systems, making sure that your operations teams are focusing on the highest severity ones. We do that as part of expert AI. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a demo I show. So I passed over here, unified security posture management. We're not just looking at cloud security posture management, we're looking at application security posture management, all of the different interactions within your microservices and agentic AI applications, data security posture management, making sure that your data stores have the proper security and protections and logging around them, AI SPM, making sure that the AI-related packages and services are also free of severe vulnerabilities and so on. Threat intel, threat hunting is part of what we do. We're focused on the adversary. We're focused on specific attacks that we see in the wild, and looking at these indicators of attack that are happening in your environment, we're able to pinpoint which adversary might be attacking your environment and anticipate their next steps. So on the runtime side, again, threat intel, threat hunting, again, part of everything we do. Zero-day attacks that might be happening somewhere else in the world. Our threat hunting teams will pick those up and send messages out to other sensors, other users to protect against those zero-day attacks. And of course, the sensor is able to take autonomous action when it positively identifies an attack in progress. Our Falcon Overwatch team performs that 24/7, 365 threat hunting for all of the data that the Falcon Cloud Security and other modules are ingesting moment to moment. So that can be a lot for a security team to process, where we can do that for you and deliver to you the detections that absolutely need a response that moment. Falcon Complete is our managed detection and response service. If your security team needs some augmentation or you're in the process of building out your security team, we can fill that gap and provide whatever level of service that you need. So digging into the specific components about how we secure those applications, I mentioned application security posture management. So these complex applications may span hundreds or thousands of containers where agents are running on containers, additional microservices. Those agents are talking to each other. They're reaching out to data stores. They're reaching out to external APIs. Each of those interactions may be a point of attack. So it's important to see what those services are so that your security team, your application developers can look at them and say, oh, did I protect that? Was I even aware that there was a handoff in this place? Because one of the really concerning vectors of attack is, look, we're giving agents all of this power, and if we don't protect or prevent them from acting out of their lane or for taking unauthorized actions, this could be a problem. So again, it starts with surfacing those issues. And what you can see is we see the interactions, we can take context from the rest of the platform and re-rate severity in the context of everything else that we're seeing in the organization. So in the right-hand column, you can see that in one use case, it's the same CVE 2022. In one case, it's critical. In the other, it shows as critical, just because the vulnerability shows as critical, but there's no path out to the internet in one. But in the other one, it's actually critical because it's reaching out to a critical data store, the payments DB, so that we will re-rate the severity in that case. I mentioned it all starts in the AI development pipeline, CI/CD. That's where cloud infrastructure is deployed from. So we're able to build container image assessment into that CI/CD pipeline. We're able to assess infrastructure as code to find vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in the CI/CD pipeline. So again, moving fast is important. We're able to do that assessment as part of that DevOps flow. Again, I mentioned before, these components are typically vended in container environments. We assess those. The sensor that operates either within container environments or in EC2 instances, we have network control and visibility over each of those sensors. So that creates more or less a proxyless service that can see the interactions between different hosts that we're protecting. And again, runtime model scanning is something new. As we develop more awareness of the kinds of attacks that we're seeing on the models, we're able to stop them in the moment. The sensor is able to detect them and take independent action. Part of the cloud security posture management, we use cross-account roles when we register accounts for cloud security posture management. And we're able to look at AWS services, whether specifically AI-related like SageMaker or Bedrock, or supporting services like EKS, ECS, and ECR, Elastic Container Registry. And we're able to assess all of those for misconfigurations that could potentially lead to some kind of exploit. And again, as I mentioned before, we're increasingly seeing vulnerabilities in AI models, and these vulnerabilities enter the models really through these supply chain attacks where the models have already been tampered with or compromised and people pull them down from public repositories, or if there's a vulnerability in the operating system, a vulnerable package, or maybe stolen credentials that enable an attacker to log into, get shell access into a container, and then tamper with the model in the runtime environment. So that's why it's important to have that multi-layer protection, because you don't know necessarily where the attack is going to be launched against. So the AI model scanning is something that we're able to do in that runtime environment. We're able to do it in the pre-runtime environment. If we see some evidence of detection before a container is launched into production environment, we're able to, you can create policies to prevent it from being deployed in production. And we provide a consolidated dashboard so you can see your risk from a 10,000-foot view, figure out where you need to focus your efforts. Here is a screenshot, for example, of some of the model detections that we see. Again, for example, Pickle suspicious call detection. There are a lot of different vulnerabilities we see with Pickle. Basically, they all fall. Many of them fall under the category of when serialized data is deserialized, it's possible for an attacker to have input some serialized data. When it's deserialized, it's not validated. So that enables the running of ad hoc commands, command and control, remote code execution, and so on. And pivoting to another module in our portfolio, Falcon Data Protection, which runs off of the same unified sensor running on a host. If you're an endpoint customer, for example, and you have the Falcon sensor running on your employee desktops, we have this Gen AI data leak protection where folks are using ChatGPT, for example. They want to create a report based upon sensitive data, proprietary data, PII, and so on. They start typing that data into the prompt. Falcon Data Protection, Gen AI data leak prevention will automatically detect that that's sensitive data, and it can block it from being input and sent out somewhere. Or it can just alert in the background to provide some insights for the security team to decide how they want to handle that, and to track the usage of these applications. We have a couple of new features coming out. Generative AI, agentic AI, really all of this is evolving so quickly. So we're evolving right behind it. Releasing new features to stay abreast of the new attacks. So with AI usage visibility, what we can do is see which users in your environment are using AI tools, either locally on their desktops or reaching out to SaaS services. We can track all that information. We can see who's using it, how much, what data are they sending. And again, this is all critical for companies to develop the kind of governance and security policies to make sure their sensitive data is being kept safe. And finally, we have a beta available for a new feature that comes from our acquisition of Flow Security. We built our data security posture management out of our acquisition of Flow, and we're releasing a AI-specific application data flow map, so you can actually visualize what data is being sent to AI applications, again, locally in your environment or in the cloud. Again, providing extended visibility so that you can make decisions about what you want to protect. So we're going to do a quick demo about how this all works. So again, it starts with overall visibility. I mentioned the AI security dashboard, which is part of Falcon Cloud Security. Here we can see our AI ML assets found in the cloud environment, and that can be the services or containers, everything that is related to that AI application. I didn't mention that part of Cloud Security Posture Management is discovery. So when you register your account, your AWS account for Cloud Security Posture Management, we do discovery and visualize your assets in a graph that shows the interconnections between those assets. So again, we show the assets themselves, container images that are AI specific, that are either dependencies or tools or models. And then we also show kind of a summary of how many misconfigurations and the top vulnerable images that are being used. And you can click into any of these widgets. So we click into the misconfigurations widget, and we can see that there is a SageMaker misconfiguration. They're not high severity, but again, you need to think holistically in terms of, like, how can I continuously improve my posture? Because you're never sure where the attack's going to come from. So the continuous improvement is important. And security posture management provides that proactive guidance for you to continuously improve your posture. So here we see SageMaker endpoint encryption not using a customer managed key. Now, maybe it's using an AWS managed key, which is good, but your company and your country may be subject to regulatory compliance requirements where you need to have your own key. So we're calling that out for you. So if it is a requirement for you, you can now take action to remediate that issue. And the other one we see, SageMaker endpoint not configured for data capture. We mentioned before, it's really important to log what's happening in your model, because if your model is attacked and it's subverted to a malicious purpose, by capturing those logs, then you can detect that there's actually something happening. If you're not collecting that data, you may never know that you're under attack. So focusing on the images themselves, we can click into, we see this widget. We can see there's 17 different images. Matplotlib, NumPy, pandas, these are commonly used in data science and AI model development. So we can click into this widget, and that brings us right into our page for all of the images. So now we're looking at all of our different container images. Now, you see this in area in red, and you might have noticed that there was one of the filters on the top row leverages AI. We clicked that to filter on that specifically, and it returned 21 different images with vulnerabilities. Now, before we filtered, I don't know if you noticed, but there were 2,600. So again, the filters are really important to focus in on what you need to address first. So we're moving over from the image-centric view to the image vulnerabilities view, where we can look at the vulnerabilities themselves, and then from there pivot to which container images have those vulnerabilities. So we see here one for SciPy, another package used for model development, and it provides guidance of which is the first version that doesn't have that vulnerability. And in that case, we just filter down from 8,000 to 41. Again, so the filters are part of the strategy to focus on either the domain that you're trying to secure or the highest severity first, based upon the context of everything else happening in the environment. And then finally, we're looking at the packages themselves, and we can see if we just drill down into one specific package, we can see the vulnerabilities associated with that package. And then finally, we can pivot to image detection. So these are actual compromise of images. Now, in this particular case, we're seeing that one of the container images has been infected with some pickle-related malware. This image is not running in any cluster right now. You could see containers impacted 0, images impacted 4. So where did these come from? How were the images themselves compromised? Were they pulled down from a public repository? Was the CI/CD pipeline compromised in some way? This provides that insight, shows the severity is critical. This is something that really must not be now deployed into a production environment, because, again, it's already a compromised container. So you can see all that here. Now, as part of Falcon Cloud Security, you can create, in the case of Kubernetes environments, you can create policies governing which container images can be deployed in the environment based upon misconfigurations that we discover through our Falcon Kubernetes admission controller, and vulnerabilities that we, in the image themselves, the image itself, that we can detect either through CI/CD pipeline assessment, background assessment of container images in a repository, or you could even run, during runtime, we have a container that can run in your cluster that's always looking at all of the images, looking for vulnerabilities. So with any or all of those, you're populating the Falcon Cloud Security console with all of those different vulnerabilities, and you can write policy that either prevents them from being deployed or alerts on the deployment. So something like this, when it's detected, one of the first, ideally, there's already a policy that says if there are any critical findings in any of these container images, they can't be deployed into production. So another layer of protection. And then finally, at the end of all this, you've discovered that you're under attack, or there's a detection. You want to create a ticket for your incident response or forensics team to take a closer look. The Falcon platform has, as part of any module, a SOAR platform, Falcon Fusion, so security orchestration, automation, and response. So again, it's based upon triggers, conditions, and actions. The trigger can be, again, a vulnerability, a detection, a misconfiguration can trigger that workflow. You in this case, if the highest expert AI rating detected is equal to critical, then take a certain action, in this case, creating a ServiceNow ticket. And there's a library of triggers, conditions, and actions that you can take to automate the response to any particular detection. So to learn more information, one thing I recommend, our global threat report. We put that out on an annual basis. We also have an annual threat hunting report. You can download those from the website. Definitely good reading, give you an idea of what adversaries we've discovered, what they're doing right now, what industries are they going after, and general trends in the kinds of attacks. Brett showed you before, 51 seconds was the fastest attack that we've seen. Last year it was 2 minutes and 7 seconds. So each year these are getting faster and faster. So we're tracking that. CrowdStrike Security for AI, we have a lot of resources on our website. You could learn about everything we're doing to secure AI. You could learn about our generative AI offerings through Charlotte AI, detection triage, and so on. We have a cloud security workshop that is on AWS Workshop Studio, publicly available. And finally, ask yourself the question, are you confident in your cloud security posture? If you're not sure, we have a free cloud security health check. You can click this link, you can go through the QR code, self-register, we'll reach out to you and do an assessment of your cloud environment. And that's a multi-cloud assessment that we do. Thank you very much. Please fill out the event survey, and feel free to reach out to us directly. Thanks a lot.